How you doing?
I'm
Everything
good.
good?
How are you? We haven't seen you since the award presentation, so
Oh
it's
yeah,
good to see you again.
it's good to
And
see
this
you.
time will be the official interview. That one was the awards and for making the presentation. Today
Okay.
we're doing interviews, and we're going to continue to do interviews. So as long as you continue to submit books, which we know you will because you work with Amy and Deena, but we want you to know that there'll be opportunities for future interviews and as a marketing tool. So we want you to use this for marketing. So we'll let you know the day that it will go live, and that way you can tell all your friends and
All right. I
family,
appreciate
and
it.
yeah, and sell books. Use it to sell. Use anything we help you with to sell books because we do want you to understand the marketing. But for today, we want to talk to you about the book that placed in one of the top categories for our 2024 awards. So that was the name of that was Runes of the Doctor's Daughter.
There
Is
you
that
go.
right?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I practiced that
I'm
word. I'm
so
like, I
glad
gotta
you
say that
said
word.
it and I didn't have to.
I know it's a challenge.
Well, actually, after I looked at it, now I did not get this until I heard you pronounce it. Before that, I'm like, what the heck kind of word is this? But after you pronounced it and I looked at it, then I could see that in it,
Yeah.
and that
Yep.
that, that did help when I could picture in my mind. Okay, Doctor's daughter, not Daughter, but Dotti. So
Right. Right.
good, good,
Yep.
very good. So to start with, tell us what does that word mean?
Dokkrsdottir. It's Docker. The word Docker is Old Norse for dark, which the protagonist Mariel is half Scandinavian, half Moor. So her father was from North Africa, so he was dark complected. They called him the Docker, and of course, being the daughter of the Docker, they called her the Docker's daughter. So it's kind of a,
So it
but
really was daughter, as in
yeah,
Daughter.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
We
okay.
spell it, yeah, we spell it Dauh or Gchter, and they spelled it Do. Well, different spellings, but that's one of the spellings is Dottir.
Well, great. So, then tell us, what had you write this book from the beginning? I know that in your bio you say that you were interested in several different topics and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
brought them all together into one book. But you tell us about it yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I've always loved history. History's always been pretty much my favorite interest. I have a lot of them, but that's always been my top interest is history. Genealogy also. So when I started kind of looking up, uh, I knew a lot about my genealogy before things like 23andMe and where you can do it by DNA. My wife taught me into doing the DNA thing, and I did find out that I had a lot more Scandinavian background than I thought. Over half of my family background is Scandinavian, in fact. Uh, so I kind of took that as being pretty interesting. Uh, Also, just little things that popped up in the news at the time. This is probably maybe 6 years ago, 10 years ago. They uncovered a burial mound in England that was a Viking chieftain or a warrior band leader of some kind. And when they examined the remains more recently with a little more detail, they discovered it wasn't a man, it was a woman. So it was a little bit shocking that there was this, female warrior that was leading warriors in the Viking age in England, fighting against the Saxons in England. So that struck me as pretty interesting because I always like the off the wall stuff, the stuff we never thought was true, and all of a sudden now we find out it is. That
Yeah.
interests me. I like it when things turn like that. It's just
I do
keeps.
too. I do too. Especially when it brings out the female warriors back then. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Yep.
good. That's a good thing.
Oh yeah, and it turns out the more we learn about it, the more we understand that wasn't uncommon. I mean, the females fought along with the males in the Viking era. That's what if we're from Scandinavia anyway. They were just as much warriors as the men were. So that's pretty fascinating to me. So I took that story. Then I started at the time when that was discovered. I started thinking that had to be a hell of a story. What was her story? This obviously she was held in very high regard because she was buried like a Viking king would have been buried. So she died in battle. They could tell that she was killed. You know, she died in battle, and she was buried with all these honors and grave goods and her weapons and everything. So clearly she held a lot of esteem and respect from whoever she was leading. So I just started.
Where did they find this grave? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but where
Oh,
did
no.
they find this?
I think they discovered it originally the 60s, in the 1960s, but they didn't really examine the remains real closely because they just assumed it was your stereotypical Viking man that they found, you know. But I think it was 6 years ago or thereabouts, they re-examined the remains. They started looking at them again and realized it was actually a woman, not a man, because it was just a skeleton, you know, that they had to go by.
Where did they find those remains?
It was, I don't remember exactly, but it was in Great Britain. It was in England somewhere. I just can't remember exactly where at. Yeah.
Wow.
But that just led me to think that had to be a heck of a story. And so I started putting together this mock-up of this Viking female warrior. And as I was writing it, it was just going to be a short story originally, just a little short story just to keep me entertained for myself. But as I wrote it, I just kept adding more elements to it. I decided I wanted to make her more interesting. Yeah, she's a Viking female warrior. That's interesting enough, but that's not enough. You know, we got to make her more interesting. So I made her essentially mulatto. You know, she's half African and half Scandinavian. That's not real common. So I threw that in the mix. And then I made her, I'd started developing her character. I love character development. That's my favorite part of writing. So I just started making her this real quirky individual that she's easily addicted to certain things. She's got this really strange personality where she's, you know, wise leader and child at the same time. She's, you know, immature and mature at the same time. And it serves to irritate her friends and allies, but it also endears her to them. So they're very loyal and love her. Then I threw in the supernatural element. I said, okay, that if I want to make a really good story, we got to throw in some supernatural. So she became endowed with this power that's both good, it's light and dark at the same time, and she has to learn to control it because it could be very, very bad or very, very good. It just depends on how she's able to use it. So she has to go through this entire learning curve through her whole life, really, and after her life, because she does die and come back a few times and throughout the story. And
wow. We can have a lot of different areas.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. That's
yep.
Great.
Yeah, she goes from the Viking Age originally to she ends up in the 1890s in Montana, and then she ends up in World War II. So I don't want to give too much away, but she ends up on the other side of the veil and she fights in the spirit world also while all this is going on. So she has a hell of an adventure ahead of her.
Well, what does the runes aspect bring to it? Is that what takes her through time?
No, not actually. It's during the Viking Age, for the Vikings anyway, they did write. They did have a system of writing, and they used line runes, which was the Futhark Eldic Runer or Futhark Elder, Futhark. I forget the other one. Younger system of line runes, and it's lettering, but it's a lot simpler than our version from a construction standpoint. But from a meaning standpoint, it's more complicated because each individual rune can be either a letter, a number, a symbol for one of their gods. It could be an item like cattle. One of the symbols could mean cattle, but it could also mean 5. It could also mean Odin, and it could also mean death. You know, so it's hard to read. You have to kind of, when you're looking at the system, you have to understand what they were trying to project because it has 5 or 6 different layers of meaning. But I just chose runes just to kind of tie it back to the Viking era. You know, that's what they wrote in was runes. So it doesn't have a particular meaning to the story per se. It was just a way to identify where it starts at.
And the reason I ask it, I never really looked at it before, but I'm always going to a psychic fair. I have a lot of people in the alternative medicine and that kind of stuff. And
yep.
There's always somebody there that reads runes, and you know, they're like in a little container and they throw them out. They look like little square pieces of wood, but I never noticed that they had something on them. So that's kind of interesting. That's
really
interesting.
Yeah, they had the Germans had runes. The ancient Germans at the time had runes. The Germanic peoples of Europe had runes. The Scandinavians, the Saxons, I think, had who were originally Germanic. It's a long story, you know, that would take hours to describe, but they're all Germanic. All the people that I write about, they were all originally Germanic, but they just spread out and had their own culture develop. But they all had runic systems. But yeah, what you're describing is like soothsayers. They would have each rune. Yep, each rune would be inscribed on a bone or a piece of wood or a rock, and they would cast them, and it would tell the future. Basically, they would try to foretell the future with them. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I never have had my runes read, but you know, I have seen them, you know, someone there. And generally, anytime you go to a psychic fair type situation, there's somebody there that reads runes, but I never really got into it or anything. Huh, interesting.
Right. Yeah, I've never had it done it for me. I'd like to, just for fun, but I've never done it.
So Wikipedia said runes are the letters of the Germanic people, and there's several different alphabets, and it lists a bunch of them, Anglo-Saxon being one of them. So that's the only one I recognize, really. So that is interesting, and that's funny because I was so thinking about what does Dokkrsdottir mean that it didn't occur to me to ask. So Rita, good job, because it didn't occur to me to ask what does runes mean and what is a rune, and that's the title of all of your books. So this book is the first in a series of books. So your little novella that you plan to write, or your little short story, has definitely expanded.
It exploded almost out of control, you could say.
I was telling you, because you've got more to go, I understand, from Amy.
Yep. We've got the first 3 are already released. Amy's going to launch 4. In fact, in about 18 days from now, 4 will release, and then there's still 5, 6, and 7 after that are already finished. God. So, and that's not counting what I might write later. I mean, that's just what's out ready to go so far.
Well, have you thought about another topic or another direction or another series?
Actually,
after this one, that is.
Yeah. Actually, it is. I think I've nailed it down to book 7, which is going to be called Rune of Building. That will be the last of the official outside of Thalsparr series, but I'm still going to write about the universe, so to speak, the Thalsparr universe that I'm creating, because I'm going to have spin-off books that cover some of the characters. It won't really have anything to do with Mariel and her destiny anymore. It'll be following other characters that were in the series. Right now I'm writing one that's about Josephine Peel, which she showed up very briefly in the first book. But she has a very interesting story, but hers is a lot different. And you're talking about going a different direction. That's why I'm bringing this up. She existed in New York City during the Civil War era, but she comes from a crime family. So if you think of like Al Capone, but 70 years earlier in New York, that's her existence. Now she does end up being pulled into Mariel's destiny, and that's what books 6 and 7 is about. She ends up being a huge, very important part of Mariel being successful, which you don't know until those last 2 books come out.
So everything's intertwined. That's cool.
Absolutely. It's very, very layered. Everything in every book is related to something in another book. So it's very complicated and intertwined. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think.
Was this Peel person someone that really was in history? You just kind of worked around her, or
no?
Just
none of. I will give a little bit of a spoiler in book 7. I'm sorry, book 7, the final book in the series. There is a character named Nikola Tesla, which does show up in the books, and of course he was a real character, and it. Kind of because he's a little bit of a hero of mine. I think Edison gets way too much credit. Tesla did far more than Edison ever did. Edison was just better at marketing. But Tesla was the one that really, he was really the father of electrical engineering as we know it now. So I had to plug him in. I had to put him in the story. So he ends up being a background character in the story as well. But most of the characters are just simply inventions. I mean, I have mentions like Abraham Lincoln's mention, that whoever's Theodore Roosevelt, whoever happens to be in history at the time period in the books is mentioned. But the only one I actually pulled in to the story was Nikola Tesla. I think that was a real person.
We were talking to Don Holbrook yesterday. I think you and him kind of synced when we did the January 7th thing, and he was telling us, you know, a little bit about stuff, and we termed him the Forrest Gump of Mexico, or what. So your stuff is kind of Forrest Gumpish too.
Well, what was fascinating about Don was we were chatting on the sidebar there on the screen while the show's going on, you know, and kicking stuff back and forth. And I was listening to his talk there with you guys. He mentioned, of course, his book is about Pancho Villa and what really happened when Pancho Villa invaded the United States right before our involvement in World War I. And it was funny because it's going to sound like I robbed him. And I wanted to make this clear in the chat bar to him. So in the future, when the book comes out, he don't think, well, this came from when he was talking to me. No, I was actually literally writing Pancho Villa invading the United States before World War I. And that there were other things involved in that, just like he did. But of course, mine's completely different because my story's different. Yeah. But it was the same thing. It was hilarious that he was talking about exactly the same thing as I was writing at the time.
Now, which book is this going to happen, Pancho Villa?
That'll be in the 7th book, in the last book.
Okay.
Yeah, that takes place between 1891 and 1940 or 1924 is when that book takes place.
Well,
so, go ahead.
They're finding more and more stuff in those bogs in the UK and Wales and every place over there. So you ought to have, you know, a lot of material, you know, to write. But what fascinates me is I've always followed Egyptian history.
Mm-hmm.
And they took all these painstaking care to preserve these bodies, and they say the reason they're so well preserved is because it's such a dry humidity down there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the exact opposite where they're finding, and they're not all buried like, you know, you would normally bury someone like this woman you're talking about. They're just finding them in the earth, and they're preserved. So that fascinates me. I don't understand.
The cool part about the reason the bog bodies are so well preserved is because it's low oxygen. There's no oxygen to help break the bodies down. Colder water and everything too. So I don't know a lot about it, but I do remember reading that in several places that it really has to do with oxygen. As long as you keep the oxygen away, then the bodies tend to preserve a lot longer.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah, I've seen them. I saw one at the British Museum. We went to England. My wife and I went with some friends to England in 2004, I think it was. And I got the great honor of going to the British Museum. Now, I could be in there all day. I could have camped in there. I could have been there the whole 2 weeks we were in England and been perfectly happy. But I was with a group of people that really didn't care a lot about history. So I had to run through this place and get everything in I could before they were ready to go. Yeah. But that's one thing I got to park at for a little while was watch the bog, one of the bog bodies that they found. That's a pretty famous one. It's in all National Geographic ones. I don't remember the name specifically of the body, but I did get to see it in person, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah. They're
so
like
all this stuff that you do, does that have an effect, or does it have do you kind of reference it or something during your books, and some of the things you find out when you go to these different museums?
Oh, absolutely.
I bet.
Oh, yeah. I find a way to pull in some things. Usually it might be an off comment about just different things like I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, it's usually kind of a sidebar type thing. It's not a major point in the books, but kind of helps set the scene, like it helps the reader understand, okay, we're talking about 1939 and FDR's having problems with his Congress, you know what I mean? It's just little things like that. But yeah, I do pull a lot of it in just for background building.
So let me ask you a question that I'm sure you get asked a lot, but how does Game of Thrones and your books, they have any connection as far as location or any of the things that happen? I mean, how are you with Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones did influence what I wrote from one specific standpoint, and my editor and my wife will definitely agree with this, I kill a lot of people in them. Like,
yes, definitely that was big. Now, I didn't watch all of them. My husband watched all of them more than once. And so I kind of by osmosis knew
right.
about Game of Thrones.
But that's
from a marketing standpoint, here's this is the reason I wanted to ask you this, because from a marketing standpoint, if you can tie your book in, like if you like Game of Thrones, you'll love Runes of the Dokkrsdottir, you know.
Yeah, a little, actually a little bit, because when people ask me what the books are about, I said, well, it's kind of a hard answer because it's several genres and several time frames all in the same story. But to a majority of the story, as the books continue to be released, the majority of the story is, if you imagine Game of Thrones and the TV show Vikings that was on the History Channel,
right.
If you take those two and smash them together with a little bit of J.R.R. Tolkien sprinkled in, then that's what it is.
there's your, and now have you ever done that marketing campaign that you mentioned those? Because those are names that people search for. So if people search for Game of Thrones a lot, and you're right there beside them, you know that. So I want you to think about that when you're thinking about the marketing.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
That's my job. That's my job, is to give you marketing tips and marketing ideas.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say the TV show Vikings might have been more of a heavily influenced than like Game of Thrones, but it would,
because my husband watched every episode of that as well. And had several seasons, so he watched that quite a while.
Personal question: was your beard ever red?
No. I was, believe it or not, I was born platinum blonde, and over years it turned to brown and then disappeared, and then what was left was turned gray, because I have no hair on top, so it's flesh color up there.
Well, my brother has a full beard like you. I don't think he's wearing it now, but his is fire red. So we've always figured, we knew we had English ancestry, but he claims that he comes from Viking stock. You know,
that could be.
Would like to think we have Viking stock.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, in our house, everything is named something about not just the Vikings, but you know, we have all the different names of our internet is named something that's Viking related and everything. And so,
really?
We have a lot of we have a wannabe in this house, and so that's what he likes to be.
I think my thing was, I've always wanted to name one of our pets. We have a little farm here, a little mini farm. So we've got goats and chickens and everything. And I always wanted to name one of them Sir Winston. I don't know why. I just want to name one of them Sir Winston. Ellen would never go along with Sir Winston. So in the book, I named a donkey Sir Winston. So I got my way.
You got your Sir Winston after all.
That's right.
Well, you need to protect those chickens, because you know they're stealing them all over the place.
Oh, yeah, I know. And it's funny because I keep seeing all the memes about that price of eggs, and I think to myself, I haven't bought eggs in 6 years. We have chickens. Go get some chickens.
Go buy some chickens, and that solves your problem now.
Exactly.
I wonder if we're allowed to have chickens. But this is getting off the topic of your book. So back to Dokkrsdottir.
I did it. It was my fault with Sir Winston and the donkey.
No. I started off with all this stuff about the Vikings and our internet names and stuff like that. So anyway, so you've already had 3 books published.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what are the names of those two? The other two?
Okay, we got Runes of the Dokkrsdottir, of course. That one was the first one. The second one was Rune of Renewal, and the third one was Rune of Destiny. The one that's coming out this month in a couple weeks will be Rune of Revenge, and that one will follow. This is where you're talking about going in a different direction. So even within the main series, it still has little offshoots that kind of go into different directions a little bit, but it still all relates back to Mariel and her destiny. It just shows all the crazy stuff that had to happen for Mariel to even do what she did, for her to even complete her destiny. It took hundreds of people doing unbelievable things just to even set the stage for her to be able to defeat the darkness. The darkness, of course, wants to overwhelm the living world and just destroy humanity. That's their aim and goal. And Mariel has to stand in the way and stop it. She's the only one that can, with her unique powers and abilities. But it takes all these other people to do all these other things to set the stage for her to even accomplish that. And book 4 takes place in the Viking Age. It's in a gap between time periods in book 1 in Runes of the Dokkrsdottir, and it follows Ingrid. So Ingrid Stonesplitter, which is her best friend and ally in the first book, and all this stuff she has to do. And going back to your talking about your I think you said your brother had the red beard. Yeah, she's huge, muscular, and redheaded, so kind of goes along with the.
Hey, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm 6 foot tall with red hair, so.
Well, there you go. Perfect. Ingrid's 6'6" with red hair, but yeah.
Well, do you have a plan as to how often you want to release each one of these new titles that are coming up?
Now I've kind of deferred to Amy on that, or Amy and Mickey with Creative Edge, because I really don't know. I mean, I'm your usual author. I know how to write books. I just have no idea what to do after that.
Yeah.
So I deferred to them, and they suggested I was putting the books out every 3 months. A new installment was coming. I've slowed down a little bit since then, but originally it was every 3 months I had a book coming out or being finished. But they suggested, of course, spreading it out to allow momentum and brand building and such like that. So it's about 3 or 4 months is what they say we're going to release them. And I'm fine with that. I mean, whatever makes sense. Like I say, they're the experts at it. I'm not. So,
yeah. Well, I was going to suggest 6 months, but if you're going to release one pretty quick, I wouldn't release the next one until I wouldn't do it after August or September of this year. You just should never release a book any later into the year than August or September. A book basically has a shelf life of 3 to 4 months. And if you publish it in December, it's really not of interest to anybody in the book business in January if it's got a 2024 pub date on it or copyright date on it.
right.
So keep that in mind.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think we've planned out that far. We're just trying to get through book 4. I think tentatively book 5, which is called Rune and Whispers. I think that one is May or June, I think is what I was told, somewhere in there.
So what kind of research, this has been one of your interests, so you obviously knew quite a bit about the whole Viking era and philosophy and all of that. So what kind of research did you have to do, and are you doing for the different books?
Most of it was already in my head. It's just from, many years of being interested in history and reading about all kinds of stuff and all kinds of eras of history. So a lot of it was just already there. I just had to pull it out of my brain when it was time to put it in a story. But I did have to go in and research specific things here and there that I didn't know much about, just to make sure I wasn't putting something crazy out there that someone's going to question. But for the most part, it was already there. So that was the benefit of having a lot of interest in lots and lots of different eras of history, because the story takes place it doesn't take place this entire span of time, but it takes place over the span of 1,200 years. So that's a lot of history that you have to kind of pull out of your brain.
That is. Wow.
Well, do you have any other passions?
A little bit of everything. I used to.
Do you have time for any other passion than this?
No, because I still have to have the real life job that feeds me too. So I got that.
You still have to work.
Oh yeah. Got
Don't
that.
be
Tired or not?
Got that. Got the books. Got the little farm here with the animals. I used to draw. I used to try to draw. I don't know that I was that good at it, but I used to try to do lead drawings. Didn't do bad at it, but I just ran out of time for it, I guess.
So where is here? You were talking about on your little farm that you have there.
Yep.
Animals.
Yep. Midlands of South Carolina. So around in between Columbia and I'm talking like people know where I'm talking about, but between them,
I have a brother. I have family that lives in Charleston. So
okay, that's where I'm originally from. That's where I was born and raised, was Charleston, in the Summerville, Charleston area. But now we're living between what a town called Orangeburg, and between Orangeburg and Columbia is where we're at now. We're in the kind of what we call the Midlands, or the Sandhills is where we're at now.
Well, my brother lived in Charleston, but he moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, eventually, where his daughter lived. But I still have. He had other family that still lives in the Charleston area. So I was actually there last year before last, for a wedding. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful area. I love Charleston.
Oh yeah, Charleston's very historic too. That's one reason I was so interested in history. Civil War history is where it began, because Charleston, of course, is where the Civil War started. So there's a lot of history there, and that's kind of where my interest started. Plus, my mom's family lines have been in Charleston and Orangeburg since the 1600s. So we've been here forever, here in South Carolina.
Yeah.
There's been other famous authors that are from the Charleston, South Carolina. So yeah, so you're in good company there.
I kind of drew in. You're talking about like Charleston history. Of course, most people that have any knowledge of Civil War history know about the Hunley, the H.L. Hunley, that was the first successful attack submarine, and it was used during the Civil War against the blockading Union ships. I managed to pull that into my book story. So I found ways to pull a lot of things in there, and some of it came from the Charleston history.
Well, do you have any input for people who really have the desire to write but don't have a background like yourself? How do you get started, or what kind of advice could you give them?
I know I just wrote an article for Books and Buzz magazine, I think it is. And that was something I discussed, was one thing you have to have is a passion. You have to have a passion for what you're writing. So whatever that is, if it's about, you really like couches, but you got to have a passion for it. Mine happens to be history and a lot of little sciences that I threw in with it. But you've got to really have feeling and deep interest in it. You almost have to live it in a way while you're writing the book.
Yeah.
The reader will definitely know if you don't. If you're just writing a book trying to sell a book, they will definitely see it. It'll show in the product, and then it won't work out well, I don't think.
Well, the author that I was trying to think of, and I just looked up his name because I knew he was from Charleston, South Carolina, was Pat Conroy. So
I haven't heard of him. What did he write? I haven't heard that name.
I should have known. Prince of Tides is one of the books that I remember.
Yep.
The Great Santini.
Mm-hmm.
He also wrote one of the ones that was an Academy Award about the that took place in the training place for kids going into the army or into the, I forgot the name of that one, but it was a pretty famous book too. But the one I did remember was Prince of Tides. So,
right. Yep. Definitely know that one. Yep. I couldn't remember the author, but I do remember the book for sure.
Right. And I could remember the author, but I could not remember his book. So as soon as you said that, I'm like, I should have known you'd ask the name of one of the books, and I didn't even know that. But I do love reading books by different authors, and then knowing because I've always loved working with books and authors. And actually, Rita's done it much longer than I have. She's the one that trained me. But I really love finding out the story behind the author, like talking to you and finding out what was it that made you want to write all these books about words that nobody can pronounce.
Right. That is one of the biggest critiques.
I can't wait to finish reading the first one. I did start it after the awards thing, and I haven't finished it yet, so I can't wait to finish it. So that's been one of the big critiques is I brutally kill a few people that people didn't want me to, and the names are hard to pronounce. Well, I did not mean that as a critical critique. That was
no. I
love that Dokkrsdottir word. So that's awesome.
Well, have you tried, since you got the Game of Thrones and all of these type of stories out there now in film land? Have you tried shopping it to anybody in the film industry?
Not yet. We're just trying to build some good traction on the book sales and get a good readership. And I have in my head, of course, every author out there probably says the same thing, so I'm not unique, I'm sure. But in my head, this absolutely could be a film adaptation. It could be a TV series, like a Netflix type series, or it could even be an animated series. It would be an awesome animated series. I mean, it could go 1,000 different ways with visually telling the story. Yep. So that's definitely something I would love to pursue in the future.
The reason you need to be marketing and getting that name out there, the name recognition is really going to be what will, and I know you're writing these books at like one every 3 months, so slow down on the writing and spend more time on the marketing.
Yes.
Building that brand and building that. I did find your article on Books and Buzz, though. I did find that, so good job with that. Now, how did you get that article? How did you get that interview? It was an interview.
Oh, that was through Mickey with Creative Edge, Mickey Mickelson.
Oh, Mickey, that's right. I didn't realize you worked with it. Okay, good. Well, then he does know about marketing and PR and all that.
Oh, yeah. So I know nothing about it. That's why I hired him.
I think you're in good hands. But the thing is, the more that you can get your name out there and get people to recognize it and connect it with things like the ones we've talked about, the Game of Thrones and all that, then the better chance you have of, and like you mentioned, Netflix. I mean, if any author wants to get their books on a TV show or a movie or something, today is the better time that it has been in history.
That's right.
With Netflix needing content and Hulu needing content and Prime needing content. They all need these things, and so they come out with these original series. Mm-hmm. And one of the authors that I had followed, all of a sudden I see something on Netflix, and it's one of the books I read, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea she was going to be, and it made into a Netflix movie. But anyway, I'm going to keep on encouraging you because I know you're going to keep on submitting books. So we'll be continuing to interview you. And so we're going to have this long-lasting relationship here.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
So our time is up, a little bit over, not too much. So is there anything you want to say just to close this out? Anything you wish you had a chance to tell people?
No, just please read the books. And if you do, leave some reviews, good, bad, or indifferent. If it's bad, say it's bad. I just need to know where I stand. That's all. But I will never know if you don't tell me.
That's very true. How are you going to know that you should go in a different direction or something if nobody says anything? But good job. Well,
but I do feel a lot better that I've won the FIRE Book Ember Award, because that helps me understand that the book is not terrible. The books are not terrible.
Very good. Well, thank you again for letting us spend some time with you and get to know you. And Rita, did you have anything you wanted to add in?
Well, I have one question I'd like to ask. What kind of manufacturing are you in?
I am in metals recovery, semi-precious metals recovery. So basically, when people make copper wire and aluminum wire and steel cable and things like that, they have mistakes or they either replace it. And the company that I run here in Orangeburg, I manage it. I don't own it. It's a 100-year-old company, but they take the wire and chop it down and recover all the copper and aluminum, separate all the elements back out, and we just resell it back into the market to be made into new things. A lot of it ends up in pennies or back in new wire or whatever. Yeah.
Well, in another life, I was a marketing rep for a company that printed all of the food circulars. I don't think there's very many of them printed anymore. And it was located, the main plant was located not very far from you. So I thought, boy, that, might be cool if that's what kind of manufacturing he was in. But that's interesting in itself, doing stuff like, what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's my second life. My first life was aluminum recycling. I did that for 25 years almost.
Yeah.
So yep.
Well, I used to be at the newspaper, and we printed out the story. They were set on the computer, and they were printed out on film. And when the pages were broken down or whatever, they sent those pages for silver reclamation.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's similar to well, it's not even close to similar, but it's basically the same thing.
I know we took lithoplate, the lithographic plates used to print the very advertisements you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
They were a base of aluminum and had a silver coating and some other chemicals on it. We would buy that after it was used and recycle it back into aluminum sheet. So yeah, I'm a little bit connected to that.
Interesting.
Very
Well, thank you so much.
It's been a great interview. It really
Oh.
has been great to get to know you a little bit more. We got a little inkling of what you were like when we had the other award presentation. So this has been great to dig down even deeper and get to know you and the books. So
I'm a weird guy, but it's entertaining.
I just thought of one quick thing. I hope they're not going to kick us off here real soon. But I'm looking at your website and the picture there of your protagonist.
Yep.
Beautiful person, woman.
Yep. Now, very interesting individual.
Yeah, it looks like you had someone design that for you, or is that how did that?
I will have to I have to lower my head in shame and say it's an AI generation. It's just AI made it.
Yeah. I love AI, so thank you. That's great. I love it.
I'll have to go take a look.
Yeah, it's on his website, and she put his website in the comments for us. So,
okay.
So thank you again, and we will look forward to the next time we get to talk to you.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Have a good weekend, sweetie.
All right, you too. Have a good one.